Great. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to all of you from the International Dyslexia Association. Um, oh, okay. I'm Jessie Lowe, president of IDA-NNEA, which includes Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. Welcome to our Read for Parents webinar featuring Brenda Peters as she discusses linking psychoeducational assessments with reading science. As a branch, we are thrilled to provide these Read for Parents webinars every other month, which focus on different IDA fact sheets and areas of interest to families and educators. The IDA fact sheets are a very good and useful tool in informing families and professionals alike on the journey of dyslexia. And as many of you parents and practitioners can probably relate, getting structured literacy instruction for students in need is more often than not a difficult journey for parents, students, and teachers. As a branch, we are honored to bring these informative sessions to you as we work to bring structured literacy to all students in all classrooms, and especially those who struggle. To support today's session, we have Andrea Pollock managing the technical aspects of the webinar. Chris Riley from New Hampshire will be monitoring and adding valuable links and resources into the chat. And then during the session, please use the chat to respond to the prompts from the presenter. Please save your questions for the end of our webinar, where we will have 20-minute QA facilitated by Chris Riley. Just a quick note, certificates of attendance are not issued for these free Read for Parents webinars. Today's webinar recording and handouts will be posted on our website within the next week. Please consider joining our branch and inviting your friends and colleagues. There are many advantages, including connecting with our community, staying informed, great deals like IDA TV, and opportunities for expanding your network. And there are a variety of membership levels. One will surely fit your needs. And so you can see how they're organized by role somewhat. Our branch has a number of activities, including Read for Parents, which we're doing tonight, Read for Professionals, a Wilson collaboration, an annual conference, which this year is called Boots on the Ground, Rolling Out an Effective MTSS. It's on March 21st. Register today for the low cost of $75 for a one-day virtual event packed with amazing speakers. There's a newsletter. There are scholarships and connections with the Reading League, New Hampshire chapter, and the Maine chapter. So, lots to get there. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening. Brenda Peters is a seasoned educational professional with over 2 decades of experience specializing in structured literacy, learning disabilities, and diagnostic testing. With an initial background in organizational development at PricewaterhouseCoopers and a master's degree from Columbia University, Brenda pivoted to teaching reading at Riviera University, influenced by her son's experiences with dyslexia. Following 10 years as a case manager, she served as director of Children's Dyslexia Centers, training over 100 structured literacy practitioners based on the Orton-Gillingham approach from level 1 through the therapist level. She also served as the president of IDA-NNEA, where she started the popular webinar series Read for Parents. Brenda is the co-founder of ACT Dyslexia Solutions Assessment Consultation and Tutoring, where she specializes in diagnostic testing for learning disabilities such as dyslexia, and she provides consultative services for families and schools. Thank you so much, Brenda.
Thank you. Thank you for that great introduction, Jessie. I'm going to go ahead and attempt to share my screen now. I hope this is right. We practice backstage. Excellent. I think it is. All right. So I am very excited to be here today to presenting something that's been kind of near and dear to my heart for a long time. But I got to get you guys all set up for a second. Hold on. I got to move you all around. You know how that is. Okay. And this one here and okay. All right. So you heard about me. I live in Londonderry, New Hampshire. I'm married to my husband, Tim. I have 3 adult children. I have two daughter-in-laws, and I now have a 7-month-old granddaughter, which I am very excited about, except that they live in Seattle. It's a long ways away. I was well, you heard, director of the Children's Dyslexia Center in Rochester. I've been in this domain, this field for about 25 years. I have two sons who have dyslexia, one profoundly, who sort of set me on this path. So I'm glad to be here today. And I have a dog named Whitney, and she's wonderful. So, all right. So today I will be going over understanding what dyslexia is, the difference between dyslexia and specific learning disability. I'll be talking about the science of reading and the theories around the science of reading. I'll go over some very basic statistics quickly, and then I'll talk about psychoeducational assessments. And then I'll walk you through the process that I use when I put together an evaluation. I am a SAFE, that means I'm a specialist in the assessment of intellectual function, which is a specialized certification in the state of New Hampshire that allows us to do level C testing that includes like IQ testing, as well as the achievement testing, everything that you would need to do in order to identify a child with a disability, which is a team decision. But also, I'm a therapist. Well, I am an instructor at the therapist level, which allows me to, in combination, make diagnoses of dyslexia. All right, so when I started on my journey, my background was totally different. But I knew my youngest son learned differently, but we couldn't figure it out. We did not know what to do. We were lost, like this, lost in the woods. And it took about 3 years for us on that journey to finally figure out that, yes, indeed, my son is dyslexic. He has dyslexia. And as I sat in down at Tufts University, he was evaluated there with Marianne Wolf and her team, not by her, but with the team. And sure enough, double deficit dyslexic. So I'll tell you about my journey as we go along, but we have a lot to cover today. So I wanted to go over what a typical deliberative session is. A deliberative session is when the school team has agreed that the child is in need of a psychoeducational evaluation. And especially initial evaluations, they can involve lots and lots of people. It is a very sometimes trying time for parents, especially imagine you're in this group with all these people. And hopefully you've been sent 5 days in advance a report from each person who's going to be presenting to you. And hopefully the team has also received a report from everyone who's on the team and read it as well, so that you can talk about this and make a decision, a deliberation about whether or not the child has a disability. So in that session, the school psychologist will probably, or if it's a SAFE, will do the cognitive testing, social emotional testing. They may do things like the BAS or other behavioral things. Remember that children who have specific learning disabilities, dyslexia, are 40% more likely to have ADHD, and they're also 40% more likely to have anxiety or depression. And it's related to that, like daily facing failure in the inability to read, which we can prevent largely. Right, so let me see. Okay, next. Okay, so then the case manager will probably do an achievement test. Someone will do it. Usually it's the case manager, and a classroom observation. The speech and language pathologist may get involved and look at expressive and receptive language, both orally and in writing. The reading specialist may do the reading and spelling assessments, including the diagnostic tools, which we'll talk about. The occupational therapist may be doing some assessments of motor control, writing output. There may be, the classroom teacher will comment on grades, strengths, weaknesses, and concerns. There needs to be a hearing and vision report by the school nurse. And finally, the parents, guardians, who are an important part of that educational team. And you're all sitting together, reading and going over these reports you might have between an hour and an hour and a half. That is a lot to digest. It can be very overwhelming to parents. And here's just an example of the reports that I generate when I'm putting together an assessment. You can see that what is required in order to really comprehend this is very strong language reasoning abilities, both written and spoken, in order to process and understand these written reports. So here's what the parent probably feels like. I know because I was there. It's overwhelming. It's hard to take all the information in all at once. And having gone through this, having experienced it, and knowing what it is from the parent side, um, for a long time, I've been thinking about this. And as a process engineer, kind of thinking about work processes, I think that has helped me kind of get to where we are right now. So I think of this approach that I'm going to show you, which is called CADS. Someplace you might see it say CAPS. It's changed, it's grown along the way. I now call it CADS. It is cognitive, academic, and diagnostic summary charting, which I'm going to show you. I believe it blends the science of learning and intelligence and achievement with the science of reading. Here we are when we look at intellectual ability, we look at three big things: verbal reasoning, visual spatial reasoning, and fluid reasoning. When we're doing our tests, we are really tapping into and maximizing that verbal and written reasoning system. It's very, very heavily laden, but we really don't get into that visual system. Once in a while, you may see a chart in the back, but the chart does not tell us relative to the population, how is the child performing? So here's my beautiful chart that's evolved over time. I'm going to go over this in detail with you, but you haven't even seen the giant stack. Well, here it is right down here. See that giant stack of papers? This is a summary of the most critical data that I pulled out. Here we have some our IQ testing. Here we have achievement testing, diagnostic testing, and I can very quickly see a pattern of strengths and weaknesses, which is required in order to make an identification in the state of New Hampshire and other places as well. Patterns of strength and weakness are what we are looking for. And I believe this charting system will facilitate and aid teams in better understanding students, especially students who are bright and gifted, who may slide under the radar because of their strong compensatory skills. David Kilpatrick has a name for them. They're called compensators. And you've all seen them, or you may have your own children. So CAD's cognitive achievement diagnostic summary chart, it taps into that visual spatial reasoning. And I would argue that combined with the written reports, we are really like tapping into both that fluid reasoning and problem solving. I will review the process that I go through when I do an evaluation. I start with a clinical interview. It's usually done by Zoom. I use a BAS clinical interview to start. Testing, I usually do it over 2 days. I do my testing, do my scoring, always check your scoring. I create my appendix. The appendix is the first thing I create. I have an appendix for every type of or test I have. And then I have a description of the subtest, and in this appendix, I put in my scores. And I also put qualitative comments here as a place to gather and collect them. I may not use all the qualitative comments in my report, but they're there. They may not fit in, but they're at least there for someone. But I do try and integrate as many of them as I can into my report. But so qualitative comments I often include in italic in the appendix. The appendix also right here, you can see, explains the normal distribution, and it also explains the categories or the labels that I use to explain the categories. From there, I begin to build my CADS chart, and I'm going to show you that process. I also then create a slide deck. The slide deck summarizes the CADS, and now I'm like kind of working in between the two. And then I'm also writing a report. And now it's like an iterative process. I'm going around and around and around, and then presenting to the family and then to the school team. So that's the process, and I'll go over that in detail with you. So our first big topic, dyslexia and specific learning disability, and I'm also going to tell you about uh, specific learning disorder, which is something else. Okay, so IDEA first came up with the federal, or owns, it houses, whatever, the federal definition of a specific learning disability. We don't have time to really go into these in detail. You probably have heard about them. I highlighted in green what I thought were some of the most important pieces. So it is a disorder in basic psychological processes. We're going to be looking for those. Oh, sorry, it's a basic breakdown in psychological processes involved in understanding and using language, spoken or written, the imperfect ability to listen, speak, read, write, retell, and do mathematical calculations. It can include dyslexia, and the disorders not included are listed things like visual impairments, intellectual impairments, etc. It's important to note that specific learning disability has 8 subcategories. So when the team is going through the deliberation process, they're going to pick the categories that impact that student. We are going to be looking at, in our case study, a student who has a reading disability. For children with reading disabilities, there's specific learning disability categories, usually basic reading skills and or reading fluency. And as a secondary consequence, reading comprehension can be impacted as well. So we will be looking for those things as a best practice. I recommend that educational teams include in the IEP the categories identified so that the reader doesn't have to try and figure that out. I think it's a great shortcut to let us know what did the team identify the student in. Here is the International Dyslexia Association's definition developed in 2002. It is currently being under investigation internationally to be rewritten. The International Dyslexia Association will probably be coming out with a new definition by the end of the year. It's kind of exciting. I think it's going to include some of the social norms and practices types of things. So that should be interesting to see what happens. But they too, it's a neurological condition, so it's brain-based. It is involved in the inability to read accurately and fluently. We see poor spelling and decoding. Often the phonological system is impacted, but not always. And there can be secondary consequences relating to reading comprehension. And this is all given with the expectation that the child has had appropriate instruction. That's important to include as well. So that's our IDA definition. Oops, something got small here. And then finally, the medical model, they use specific learning disorder. So if you see disorder, we're all talking about the same thing. It's the inability to read quickly and accurately. Before I move on, I want to explain what the difference is between specific learning disability and dyslexia. So dyslexia is that inability to read quickly and accurately and can involve and impact many things. A specific learning disability is when the team at the deliberation session agree that the dyslexia is to the point that the child requires individual education in order to close that learning gap. They have a specific learning disability that requires individual education and IEP because of their dyslexia. And yes, dyslexia can be included in the IEP and it can be included in the report. And I bet Chris can find the letter. I think it's from 1995, the Department of Education, that it is okay to use those terms in reports so that we all know what we're talking about. Okay, next onto the science of reading and the theories upon which these assessments are based. I'm presenting these to you in chronological order. The first is a 4-part processor. It was developed in 1977, and it has 4 parts. We have the orthographic processor. This is where we are reading its letters. We are reading letters there as input, or we are writing letters as output. With the 4-part processor and processors, think about input and output. When we go over testing, subtests, assessments, tests, subtests, think about input, output. How was information derived? It's very important, as you're going to see in some of our tests. Next, we have the phonological processor, which is the sound system. This is listening and speaking. The phonological processor and orthographic processor need to work together. That's phonics in order to read and spell. Then we have a meaning processor. And we know words can have multiple meanings. Here's our vocabulary, and that context processor helps us understand what vocabulary are we talking to. Are we talking about a bat that flies, bat the ball, bat my eyelashes? The context helps us determine. So that's our 4-part processor. Next, we have Gowan-Tumner's simple view of reading, which is an equation, the product of which is reading comprehension. The 2 factors that are important: decoding, which is word recognition, and language comprehension. If either one of these is 0, reading comprehension will be impacted. It'll be a 0. Now, so that will be important for us to remember as we move forward. I will be using the simple view of reading in a lot of my explanations with parents and families and school teams. So we will be coming back to this. The simple view of reading was then expanded by Hollis Scarborough in 2001. Here we have word recognition times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. Hollis took the 2 factors, word recognition and language comprehension, and broke them out into subcategories. These subcategories are what we are going to be tapping into when we do our assessments, okay? Hollis Scarborough broke these out for us. In my process and what I'm going to be presenting to you, I expanded on Hollis's rope. I know I did it. I included it, I think of it as, and you're going to see, as like a wire filament. There are 2 of them. One is working memory and one is processing speed. I think of those as like wire filaments, and the thicker, the stronger working memory and processing speed are, the thicker that wire, to which language comprehension and word recognition wrap around. When they're not thick, when they're weak, when it's small, then it's difficult to support the process of reading and comprehending. And we are going to see that often children with dyslexia, reading difficulties, have those weaknesses in working memory and processing speed. We see that consistently. So we have a little wire filament there. Next, Joan Sedita in 2019 expanded on the reading rope to the writing rope. And finally, in 2021, Jan Wazowitz expanded on all of these. And now here we have reading on this side, input and output. And we have writing, speaking, input and output. And she's done a lot of lectures and work on this. I think there's a lot of potential here, and maybe some point I'll link all of my assessments to this. But I think it's all of these, I think, are powerful tools for us to be thinking about reading and linking these theories to the assessments that we're doing and student performance. The one thing I can say about all of these is that structured literacy is appropriate for all students. 1/3 of students will learn to read no matter what you do, no matter what you give them. 1/3 of students require that direct instruction, and then 1/3 of the students required structured literacy. Systematic instruction that includes phonological awareness or phonology. It directly teaches the sound system, sound symbol system of language. It teaches syllables and syllable types because that helps children understand what the vowels are saying. Morphology, the meaningful parts of the word. Syntax, its grammar and sentences. Semantics, what does it mean? And then back to phonology. So we are continually teaching these in structured literacy. Structured literacy approaches benefit all students, but are essential for that bottom third that need that direct instruction. Okay. All right, hold on to your hats, guys. We can do this. We're going to move on to basic statistics. I promise you it won't be bad. Okay, so basic statistics, we'll go over normal distribution, standard scores, scaled scores, and standard deviation. I will be sending to the team this PowerPoint. These are clickable links. This goes to a glossary of assessment terms from Pearson. I liked it because I think it explains some of the test statistics that we'll be going over pretty well. So a normal distribution follows a normal pattern. It has a bell curve. Intelligence testing and achievement testing follows a normal distribution. The test results that I'm going to show you and the tests I'm going to show you are norm referenced. That means they were given to hundreds or thousands of children and they follow a normal distribution. We are going to see that 68% of the population in a normal distribution falls within one standard deviation from the mean. The mean here is a standard score of 100. That's the 50th percentile. And then we can see we can go left, that would be lower scores, and we can go to the right, that would be higher scores. Remember, our mean is 100. Next, I'm going to show you a more detailed chart. This is from the Wechsler, and I wanted to use this one because next we're going to talk about labels. But I choose in my reports to use the Wechsler qualitative labels down here, and we'll talk about labeling in a minute. So here we can see, again, our normal distribution. Here is our mean, standard score of 100. We are at the 50th percentile. Don't worry about t-scores. And then here, scaled scores. This is important to know too. Scaled score of 10 is the same as a standard score of 100. Scaled scores are usually used for subtests. They're less specific. They only go up to 19. Maybe they go to 20, I don't know. So they are less specific. Whereas here, look, we go up to 145 on this chart alone. I think it goes up to a total of 160. It has more specificity. Standard scores are more specific. They're more often used for composite scores or for longer things like achievement tests. So you are going to sometimes see scores that are single digit like this. Those are scaled scores, usually subtests. And then here we have our standard scores. All right. And then percentile ranks, they always convert to a percentile rank. Now, okay. I think Chris put in the chat the link to this psychometric conversion charts. And she might even put a message in for the word nerds. You might want to print it out. I have mine. I have many of these all in sheet protectors. But what this does is it gives us a standard score. It tells us the percentile rank, gives us a scaled score, and then it also gives us labels. We're not going to use those labels, but this is the conversion chart that we use to better understand the child scores. Labels are important. Different test manufacturers use different labels. Here we have Pearson, here we have ProEd, and they use different labels to describe the standard scores and the scaled scores. It's important for you to pick one. I picked the WISC and the Wechsler definitions, labels, because the WISC is the most common intelligence test used in this area. So I kind of use that to drive the labels that I'm using. So even though I may do the KTA, and I do the CTOP, the tower, I am still going to use the labels from the WISC throughout my entire report. In my appendix, like I showed you, it will have a table and it will explain the labels. So use consistent labels throughout, really important. All right, so now we just talked about that normal distribution. And so I've created my appendix, and now I have selected the tests I've input my test. This chart will automatically plot my scores for me, both scaled and standard. Here you see a standard score on this verbal index of 116. That's a percentile rank of 86. All right. Down here you see similarities is 13. That's a standard score of 84. 13, you see that number, you know that's a scaled score. This is a subtest. What I wanted to really point out to you here is that notice this red line correlates with this line. That is the mean of a normal population, a normal distribution. This right here is the 50th percentile. Right here is one standard deviation below. That's a standard score of 85. That's the 16th percentile. And then one standard deviation above, right here, is a standard score of 115 with a percentile rank of 84. So when we look at her name is Susie. That's her pretend name. When we look at Susie's scores like this, it doesn't look bad, right? So in the chat, what do you think of Susie's scores? I don't see the chat, so I'm going to keep going. But think about Susie's scores. And now I want to show you the next thing. So this is the normal distribution. But remember, we just did all of this. Oh, and look, so that you could see better, I put this on top of it. So here, see, this is the normal distribution, mean of 100. So here are our scores. Think of these scores as, getting farther and farther from the mean as we go out, okay? Okay, so here's Susie's scores. For Susie, we use a score called the General Ability Index, which is from the WISC, and many of the IQ tests, which I'm going to go over with you, take some of the key intellectual abilities, verbal reasoning, visual spatial reasoning, fluid reasoning, and if some of the processes like working memory and processing speed are lower than what we expected, that means the full scale IQ will be a little lower. Then if this general ability index is higher because we've removed the working memory and processing speed, I am going to use that as my stake in the ground against which I'm going to compare achievements as well as diagnostic testing. So now we have to move our lines. We are no longer looking at the normal population, normal distribution. We are looking at Susie's general ability and what is one or more standard deviations below her mean. And her mean is that standard score of 144. If we go one standard deviation below, we're looking at a standard score of 109, which is the 75th percentile. And you know that children who are in the 75th percentile are not going to be necessarily identified in special education. But that's for Susie, one standard deviation is that 75th percentile. Now, I don't know if you remember, but years ago, they used to use discrepancy model, and it was generally about 22 points. That's 1.5 standard deviations away. So 1.5 standard deviations from Susie's mean would be 22 points. It'd be like 102. Right around what's average for everyone else is 1.5 standard deviations away for Susie. So it's important to remember we are always looking at what is the average ability for the student, and especially remove the things that are causing their disability if needed, like working memory and processing speed. Okay, so now I'm going to go over very quickly psychoeducational assessments. In the state of New Hampshire, this is the handbook. It used to have colors. I don't know what color it is now. Maybe somebody can put it in the chat. It'd be like lavender or whatever. And I think, are we on year? Yeah, 2023. So this is all of the federal and state regulations. And on page 77, you will find for specific learning disability, this table that lists what needs to be included to make an identification by a team of a specific learning disability. We have to have academic performance achievement, intelligence testing, a custom observation, a hearing and vision screening, Yeah, and hearing and vision. It doesn't say anything about diagnostic testing. I'm not sure if other states have that at the state level, but we'll definitely talk about that. So in diagnosing dyslexia and specific learning disorder, which those are diagnosed, and identifying specific learning disability, we have to have cognitive, achievement, and diagnostic testing. These are the most common cognitive, achievement, and diagnostic tests in the Northeast and probably in the entire country. And I'm going to go over those now. Cognitive testing, it's important to understand, is based on the theory of Cattell, Horn, and Carroll. We call it the CHC theory. And it's broken intelligence down into three stratums or three categories. The very top level is lowercase g, general intelligence. And then we have broad intelligence. Here's where we find fluid reasoning, verbal reasoning, visual spatial reasoning, working memory, processing, speed. And then these are broken down into even narrower abilities. There are 69 total. When you are looking at assessment tests and you see letters after it like these, remember, if it's a capital G, that's the broad stratum 2 and below. Lowercase g is overall global intelligence, but if you see these letters, it's relating to that CHC theory and specific abilities and skills that are being measured. So now let's go over the three common tests that we have. The first most common that we see is the Wechsler intelligence test for children 6 through 16.11, 17 years old. Most commonly, you will see these are the scores that are subtests that are required in order to get a full scale IQ. These are the primary index scales, and then they are described here. You will see that it includes verbal comprehension, visual spatial reasoning, and then these are the subtests that these composites are built upon. You'll see here that we have, let's see, processing speed index is one, working memory, fluid reasoning, visual spatial, and then those all combine together to give us a full scale IQ. And then if the child is impacted in working memory and processing speed, always, always, always ask for or look for the general ability index, because in our case, we see that it's very different. It's actually at the 95th percentile, which is in the gifted range. So general ability index, when we see discrepancies in some of those underlying processes, you want to be looking for that. Here are some additional tests that you can look at, and then some complementary subtests that tap into specifically dyslexia and other things. Here we have the differential ability scale 2. I really like this assessment. It goes from 2.5 to 18 years old. It has a version from 2.5 to 7 years old, and that is broken down into 2 subsections. So I like this test because it's floor. It can go lower and kids get to do more questions. And I think we get a better sense of where they stand. So I like it for that reason. It has many, many different components and parts and different types of tests. This differential ability scale includes verbal ability, nonverbal reasoning, and spatial ability. That's it. Those are the core intellectual abilities that the DAS is measuring. But it is also then looking at processes that support those working memory, processing speed. And it also, what I really like as well, is that it has a diagnostic piece so that we can drill down and look at some of the factors that may be affecting the student's ability to perform. Finally, we have the Woodcock-Johnson 5. Do you see that, guys? 5. We're out with the 5. It came out on February 1st. Yay. So the Woodcock-Johnson prides itself on its breadth of assessment. This cognitive test has over 20 subtests. It is considered the Swiss Army knife of testing because it has so many. Because there are so many tests and you have to get them in within a certain amount of time, it tends to have less specificity than maybe some other tests. I think it would be a good test to get a sense of where a student is and then provide direction in terms of where to look for diagnostic testing. So those are the three major achievement tests that you'll probably see. I'm sorry, cognitive tests that you'll probably see. So now next moving on to our achievement tests. These are usually completed or done by the case manager. And we're going to look at the Wyatt KTA and the Woodcock-Johnson 5 achievement is coming out at the end of the month. So I put it on there. So first we have the Wyatt, the Wechsler Individual Achievement Test, 4th edition. This is co-normed with both the WISC and the DAS. So that means we can compare groups. We can actually go in when we're scoring these and say, compare the IQ testing and tell me, is that what you would predict? So it gives us a very good idea of whether like the predicted achievement is matching that ability level. So always look for that too when you're doing testing. The achievement tests look at reading, math, written expression, oral language, and they give us a total achievement. Many, many subtests, and you get to pick and choose what you want to focus on depending on what you're looking for. This ranges from 4 to 50 years old. Next, we have the Kaufman test of educational achievement, the KTEA. Again, reading fluency, math, writing, oral language, language processing. We have the subtests and composites. It's for ages 4 to 25. Very popular test. It's also co-normed with the WISC as well as the DAS. So I can put in my KTA scores and say, given my scores on the intelligence testing, how's this performance? What's the predicted achievement? Important to know. And then finally, we have the Woodcock-Johnson 5, which will be out, they're saying at the end of February, sometime in March. Again, it is the Swiss Army knife of achievement tests. This has 26 subtests. And again, it gives you a good idea of specific skills and where to look to get elaboration. Now we have diagnostic testing. I'm going to tell you about the diagnostic testing that I use. I like to, and these are used by the center as well. The center doesn't use the GORT, but they do use the CTOP and the Tower, and those are both really gold standards, although they all are, and we'll go over those now. Okay, please, as we go along, put your questions in the chat so that we can answer them all at the end. Okay, so now we have the CTOP. The CTOP has two different kind of versions for 4 to 6 and then 7 to 24. It tests phonological awareness, phonological memory, and rapid naming. These are the underlying processes that we are going to look for that may be causing the dyslexia. Is it the sound system? Is it the memory system for sounds? Or is it rapid naming, which is highly correlated with reading fluency? And here are the subtests that are related to that. Next, we have the GORT. The GORT tests reading comprehension under timed conditions. It looks at rate, accuracy, combines these two together to give us a fluency score as well as the comprehension score. It tells us how well does a child read and comprehend under timed conditions, because remember, one of the identifications can be reading fluency. Children don't have unlimited time to read, so it's important to understand how quickly and accurately can they do that. If they can't do it quickly and accurately or commensurate with their general ability, then we need to take a look at that. And then we have the Tower, the test of word reading efficiency. This is a great little test. It comes in, it only takes 45 seconds. There are 2 pieces. You do sight word reading. These are real words. They're reading a list of words, 45 seconds, as many as you can, as quickly as you can, and we're counting your accuracy. Next, we have phonemic decoding efficiency, and that's reading nonsense words. Again, 45 seconds, and it gives us a total score. One of the things that's nice about this test is it does have a version A, B, C, and D, so it can be used for progress monitoring. It's appropriate for ages 6 through 24 or 25. Okay, so now we have gone over the primary diagnostic tests, the achievement tests, intelligence tests, and now I want to circle back to the simple view of reading. Uh-oh, all my things didn't show up. Here we go. There we go. Okay. So the simple view of reading, decoding times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. We can now start plugging in to our equation the subtests that are going to tap into this. And I'm going to go over that with you now. Remember, here we have, if we have word recognition and language comprehension, two factors. If a child is really, let me see something. I forgot that these fly in. Okay. So for children who are good at language comprehension, they understand the words. They can't get the word off the page. They're poor word recognition. We're not sure why. We'll find out. Those are children who we would call specific learning disability, usually in basic reading skills and or reading fluency. We call that dyslexia. They become specific learning disability if the school picks them up and they require an IEP in order to close that gap. They could get a 504 because they don't require specialized instruction, but still have dyslexia. A proficient reader is good at both language comprehension and word recognition. Down here, we have children who are poor at word understanding, but they're good at decoding. These are the children that have a specific language impairment, and Tiffany Hogan would call these children developmental language disorder. And that would be if we see that our students are weak in that area, we've done our probes and we probably want to turn it over or collaborate with a speech pathologist in order to understand if presence of DLD and the extent. And then finally, we can have both specific learning disability dyslexia and specific language impairment DLD together when we have both poor language recognition and poor decoding. So as we go through our case study, I think about where does this child fall? What tests would I use to do that? So now we are going to do our case study walkthrough. Remember, here are the parts. I pick my tests, do my scoring, make my appendix, start to build my chart, do my slide deck, write my report, and meet with my parents. Let's go through that together. So the charting process. So I select the tests and subtests that I want to put in my chart. Here I have my cognitive tests. Here I have my reading tests. They include both diagnostic and achievement testing. Here in yellow, I have my CTAP testing, diagnostic testing. Here we have that language, oral language. This is from achievement. Here we have written language from achievement. Here we have math from achievement. And I've input my scores. It calculates my percentile rank and it plots my scores for me. And she looks pretty average. Susie looks okay. Got a lot of stuff down here, right? Then we put in our population mean, there it is. But we know that population mean doesn't apply to Susie because we tested her. We gave her an IQ test and we saw that her general ability index is at the 95th percentile. Right over here, it is standard score of 124. I then put in my green because in all my reports and my slide deck, you're going to see green represents scores that are our strengths. And then I use yellow to represent scores that for that child, for their average, represent an area of weakness. So we've started to put that together and our chart is coming to life. We're starting to see what's happening. Next, always look at what is their achievement versus ability. Remember, I use the general ability index. Right here's that score. And here's their total achievement down here. And remember, each of these, each column is 5 points. 3 columns equals 1 standard deviation. I can figure out how far she is by just counting the columns, can I? 5, and etc. Or I could just subtract. For standard score of 124 for general ability, minus for achievement 92. I have a 32 standard point difference. If I divide that by a standard deviation, which is 15 points, I find that she is 2.1 standard deviations from her mean. She's 2.1 away. Remember in the olden days when we used to use 1.5 standard deviations as this is giving us data. It's telling us that there's a big difference and it's not due to chance. And down here are my little cues too. If we could expand this, you would see, but the red here represents this. Here we have our standard deviations right here. Here we have strengths and weaknesses. And then number 1, I've explained that I'm making this comparison between achievement and intellectual ability. Next, line number 2 that I'm looking at is processing speed. I'm looking for the processes, what is causing this child to struggle. I see that on the WISC, she scored at the 70th percentile, which is a robust score. But I see that we do have some variation here, not too much though. 3-point difference, that's not significant. But down here, look. Remember, I told you green is hot, is above, as higher, white is in the middle, and then our yellow scores are 25th percentile and below. So we can see what's causing this. Well, rapid naming related to is impacting her. What's the difference between here we have processing speed, here we have rapid naming? It's important to understand what and how is being measured. If the team only looks at the processes that are identified in the 10 subtests that make up the full scale IQ, they will miss some important information. Children who have dyslexia may do well on this processing speed because it's visual scanning and motor with a written output. In coding, they're looking at a symbol and they're making a little mark. In symbol search, they're looking at patterns and they have to make a mark if they don't see if something's not represented. So just visual scanning, motor output. Here, visual scanning, but oral output. This is where we often see children with dyslexia begin to struggle. So you need to be drilled down and look at that the oral language output as well as written output. Super important. So for Susie, we see that she has a 33-point difference between processing speed and her CTOP rapid naming. That's huge. If we do the math, 35 standard points divided by 15 standard points, which is 1 standard deviation, shows us she's 2.3 standard deviations difference between her mean and where her performance is. So she has some huge differences here. These are underlying processes that are causing her to struggle. Line number 3. Here we are looking at reading comprehension versus listening comprehension. Both the KTA and the Wyatt and probably the Woodcock 5, since it has such breadth, include listening comprehension. It is essential that if your child is being evaluated or you're evaluating a child, do listening comprehension, because when we think about the simple view of reading, we pull out that need to decode and we're only looking at language comprehension. This gives us a good idea of where that child falls. And we see that for Susie, she can listen and comprehend at the 88th percentile. See that right here? But when she has to read a passage and comprehend, she's performing at the 16th percentile. Oh, and notice here's that scaled score. That's because it's a subtest. But 16th percentile, we see a 33-point difference between those two scores, 2.2 standard deviations. Again, we're not using a discrepancy model. We're using this as evidence, though, of that pattern of strengths and weaknesses. So next, before we go on in detail, now we're going to go through Susie specifically. But now that you've seen some of this, is Susie, did I put in these? I did. Okay. Put in the chat, is Susie a 1, 2, 3, or 4? I know. Which category, which quadrant is she going to be in? 1, 2, 3, or 4. Is she just dyslexic? Is it just decoding? Is it decoding and language comprehension? Is it neither, or is it both? Oh my gosh, you guys are all brilliant. Look at that. Amazing. Yes, she's a 1. She is just dyslexic. Her language comprehension is amazing. And now we're going to do the next part. You are going to be my parents or my school system, and I'm inviting you to Susie's feedback session. So let's begin. So Susie was referred for special education. She's in 4th grade and she's 10 years old. Her parents are concerned because Susie's very bright, but she's not, like, she's struggling to read and it's unexpected. She has a family history of giftedness, reading struggles. She was referred to special education in 3rd grade, but didn't qualify because she's smart. She's getting along. She's things are going okay. She can do the classroom work. Um, but there has still been ongoing reading and spelling difficulties that are affecting academics and beginning to also affect self-confidence. We never want to see that. We want to prevent these children from feeling bad about themselves because it is preventable. Super, super important. And then also in this time right now, it's important to also identify when did COVID happen for this particular child and is it relevant to language development? For Susie, she was in preschool when COVID hit in April 2020. In kindergarten, she attended 2 days and they were wearing masks. And a big part of reading is that visual, how the lips, tongue, and teeth are moving and saying words. So if you're wearing a mask and you have a child who is predisposed to having difficulty with phonology, this can be impactful. Next, I go over the definition of dyslexia with the family. I go over the simple view of reading with the family. I go over Scarborough's rope with the family. And now you see, I have also inserted my working memory and processing speed. Those are those wire filaments, the girth of which depends on their strength. If they're like, if it's weak, an area of weakness, it's going to be a skinny little wire. But if it's robust, it's going to be nice and thick to allow language comprehension and word recognition to wrap around. We go over very briefly what with the family, what a normal distribution is. We point out Susie's, what is Susie's average for Susie is this standard score of 124, and we're going to look at scores that are below that. What are the outliers for Susie? So now let's specifically look at Susie's intelligence testing. And down here, let me point out, is my key for coding these scores up here. Anything in gold is the 25th percentile and below. That's a standard score of 90 and below. Between standard score of 75 to 90. I think I got the numbers wrong. I might have to fix this. Anyway, from the 25th to the 75th percentile, those are scores within the average range. And finally, scores above 110 are the 75th percentile and above. So we can see that for Susie, she has lots of green, and we like to see that. She has some very robust cognitive abilities. We see, though, she has some weaknesses in working memory. This is a weakness for her, not just a relative weakness. For the general population, it might be a relative weakness, but for her, it's a big difference between her ability at 124, big difference. And processing speed we see in the average. Here we have our stake in the ground, our general ability index that we're going to compare things to. Here we have cognitive proficiency, which is a combination of working memory and processing speed, which is in the average range. Full scale IQ with all of these things combined, 87th percentile. So the best picture for us of her ability, if she didn't have difficulties with working memory, would be that 95th percentile of performance. So now let's go to Scarborough's rope. We're going to look at the first thing, comprehension. The end result, the product of having language comprehension and word understanding. And here we have listen. Over here, I tried to make it so you could follow along. Here in yellow, I have highlighted in yellow the things that I am talking about. I'm talking about listening comprehension, which is over here. And I'm talking about passage comprehension. And this is line number 3 right here. And I'm making those comparisons. And we're seeing that, yes, there are some very big differences. We have the 86th percentile versus the 16th percentile. When we ask her to read quickly and accurately and comprehend, she begins to struggle. But when we allow her to just listen, she does very well. Her difficulty is not in understanding the words, instead it's getting the word off the page. Next, we have language comprehension. This is the upper part of the rope. We have background knowledge. It's above average. She reads all the time. They're very active in learning and doing things. So above average background knowledge. We see that for vocabulary on the WIS, she's got some very robust scores on vocabulary, similarities, her receptive vocabulary, expressive vocabulary. Look at all the green, couple little whites, but yeah, she is very robust in language comprehension. This is not her area of weakness. And we see here, language comprehension, here's some more of the verbal language related abilities. And we see, yeah, those represent strengths. She's strong here. Next, we have word recognition. Wow, look at all the yellow or gold. Just pops right out at you, doesn't it? And it also pops out at you over here. I don't have specific lines in here for these, but I did put in the highlights so we can see that phonemic proficiency, that's being able to do that phonological processing quickly and accurately, is impacted. We see that elision, which is one of the higher level phonological processing tasks. It's where we say tiger without the g, tiger. You have to do lots of different phonological tasks in order to do that. It's the highest level of the 3 subtests in terms of like cognitive load. And we see that that's where she's struggling a lot. With direct instruction regularly in phonological processing, we can see these scores move quickly and improve dramatically, which will then help to improve the decoding and encoding. We see that all the time when we work with children at the centers and whatnot. We see that in terms of reading decoding words, because remember, we'll go back to the room. She struggles. She's at the 10th percentile for real words. That's untimed. For reading nonsense words, she's at the 4th percentile. What this tells us is that she has better word recognition, probably because she's been exposed to them, but she has difficulty applying her phonics knowledge. And hence the score at the 4th percentile. And we see that her spelling overall is at the 18th percentile. So she is the child that has that difficulty with decoding. Now let's look at some of those underlying processes. Remember, in the rope, here is our memory, right? That's our wire filament. And we see that for her, lots of yellow scores, gold scores, those are areas of weakness for her. And we're going to have a narrow wire filament to wrap things around, which will impact her ability to read quickly and accurately. And that's what we see. And here are some of those memory scores. Here are the, oh yeah, here they're highlighted, and then down here as well. Interestingly, one thing that you want to pull apart when you're thinking about the CTOB is that we have memory for digits, and then we have non-word repetition. She had quite a bit of a difference, 3 standard points. That's kind of a lot. And what we're seeing there is it's difficult for her to hold speech sounds in that auditory memory. So holding unfamiliar speech sounds is difficult, and that is attributing to her difficulties as well. Next, we have processing speed, the other piece of the wire filament, and we see some green. Remember that, but this green, remember, is visual scanning with a motor output. We're using a pencil. Here we have visual scanning with an oral output, and we see that she struggles. This is characteristic of children with dyslexia. And then we see that with proficiency, David Kilpatrick actually got this added to the Wyatt so that because it's one thing to be able to do phoneme manipulation with unlimited time, but nobody has unlimited time. So measuring that is important to them as well. And then we see under timed conditions, she does struggle also with reading real words and especially nonsense words. She does not have the knowledge and ability to apply that phonics knowledge and to do that quickly and accurately. But with direct instruction, in structured literacy, we would expect her to move that trajectory of learning pretty quickly. Written expression, we see some white, some average scores. We see some things that are in that low average, below average. It's an area of weakness. For Susie at this time, when children are, and they often are, kids with dyslexia are often generally low on written expression because they can't spell words. As they become better readers, they will become better spellers and then hopefully better writers as well. So I generally encourage families and school systems to wait. Let's get the reading going, the spelling going, and then we can circle back to the written expression. Mathematics. Math is a strength for her, 95th percentile. This child has tenacity. She did not give up. She kept going and going and going. She was pretty amazing. Math is, down here we see, an area of strength and something that she really enjoys. So overall, our Susie meets the criteria of a child who is twice exceptional. She has a sea of strengths as well as weaknesses, which we just went over. I'm not going to read this to you, but she, in my opinion, does meet the criteria of a student, twice exceptional, 95th percentile and above in terms of general intellectual ability, and who also has dyslexia. I would recommend that Susie be identified as having a specific learning disability and basic reading skills due to reading fluency, I should say, as well as decoding, and that she is also intellectually gifted. I recommend providing one-on-one daily structured literacy by a qualified provider. We know that the qualified provider is super important to see the results we want to see. Some type of phonemic awareness like Haggerty or Equipped for Reading Success. And of course, pairing that process with letters as quickly as possible. Enrolling in Bookshare, which is free to students who have print disabilities, which she does. They have over 1 million copies of her books that she could have access to, that she would be able to listen to at a level that's commensurate with her intellectual capacity, but may not be able to decode because she doesn't have those skills under her belt yet. Provide ongoing training in assistive technology. A lot of times I see in IEPs allow speech to text, text to speech, things like that, but no training. If you want a tool to stick and work, you need to integrate into the IP, in my opinion, direct instruction in whatever that assistive technology is, so that the child will start using that and integrating that. Allow extra time for tests and quizzes. Don't deduct for spelling on tests unless it's a test of spelling. And allow her to participate in the gifted and talented program. She didn't get to qualify because she couldn't finish in time. But the general process or recommendations in that situation is to not penalize this child on because of their disability, give them the extra time they need to see how well they can perform. So that would be my presentation to my families. And that's it, guys. We're done. But now I can take questions. But in the meantime, many of you may know, one of my favorite things to do is to start learning collaborative groups. I've done tons of book clubs. Many of you have probably been in my book clubs. I love them. But I'm thinking of maybe, I don't know, we'll see, doing a tips, tricks, and tools for assessment and more. So if you're interested, scan this, fill this out, and let's see what we can get going if there's interest. It would sort of be, when we had COVID, we had tips and tricks for teaching virtually. It was fun. So anyway, fill out the survey. We'd love to hear what you think. And now I am going to open it up to questions.
All right. Well, thank you. All right. First, sort of glimmer and glow is people are saying they absolutely love the way you're describing processing speed and working memory in the strands of the reading rope. They really like that approach. It's resonating. So thank you. Um, Shannon just mentioned that she does miss the tips and tricks as well. So you can see people are clamoring for that. So that's great. So one of our first questions was, can you review again how you found Susie's GAI index?
Okay, yes. So I'm still sharing, right? Okay, so guys, you might want to close your eyes because I'm gonna have to go scrolling back. Okay, here we go. No, okay, here we are. So the GAI, her general ability index, is spit out by the computer. Almost all of these tests now are done online. The achievement test, intelligent test. So I go on to Q Global, I put in the raw score, it compares it to the distribution, that normal population, and given her age and grade, it gives me a score compared to all the other kids who took the same test. So for verbal comprehension, she came out at the 86th percentile. Here and the tests that she did to get that score were similarities and vocabulary. Then she did visual spatial reasoning, two subtests that make up that as well. She scored at the 97th percentile. Amazing visual spatial ability. Next is fluid reasoning. This is the ability to apply problem solving to new, unique problems that you haven't seen before. And she scored at the 88th percentile. Many uh, theorists in intelligence believe that these are largely the core intellectual abilities. And that's, remember, we saw on the DAS, it also looked at these as the core. But other things that we look at are working memory and processing speed. We know that children with disabilities are often impacted in working memory and processing speed. So we take those out. We don't count those in this score. We're only going to look at verbal comprehension, visual spatial ability, fluid reasoning, those core intellectual abilities. That gives us her general ability index. With accommodations and accommodations, we can accommodate working memory, we can accommodate processing speed, we can provide direct instruction in decoding so that this child can begin to approach her potential, which is at the 95th percentile. Does that help?
I would hope so. We'll find out if they respond. Another one of our questions. Yep, she said yes. So thank you. Um, the situation you're describing about this very intelligent student with dyslexia, sort of passing under the radar, is it one that you find that happens more with girls, boys, or it's spread pretty evenly among the genders?
So I think it's spread pretty evenly among the genders, but we do see those typical patterns where boys tend to act out and girls tend to internalize. Um, but what I do see as a pattern is that because I'm a private evaluator, I would say the majority of my clients are children who are at above the mean of 100. They're above the 50th percentile. These kids are like bright. They're even in the gifted range and they're not making it, and we don't understand why. It is this cognitive testing and this diagnostic testing that helps us drill down and figure out what's happening so that we can directly address their needs. The other thing that I didn't show you, but I do include, is I do the WADE. The WADE stands for the Wilson Assessment of Decoding and Encoding. It goes through Barbara Wilson's levels 1 through 12. It includes reading and spelling. I like using that because it helps me inform the team of where should the team begin with instruction for this student. So I do that's like an informal assessment. It's not standardized. And then I also include the Fry words for reading and spelling. And we want them to be able to generally spell the first 300 and read the first 1,000. When I was director of the center, that's what kind of our goals. That's what we want to work on, but at least spell the first 100. I think the research indicates that 50% of the words that we see in text are made up of those first 100 words. So we need to know how to spell them.
Great. Someone asked if you could put up that slide that you had for that tips and tricks. You had that QR code, if they could put that slide
Yes.
back up. Thank you.
There you go. Oops, wrong one. There we go.
There we go. Thank you. And then one of the questions was, why is it suggested that you use this descriptions from the same test measure?
So it doesn't get confusing. If you use, let's go back to that too. So it would be very confusing, and it's easy to do to use that test makers, but it gets very confusing. Let me go back. And John Willis, who is my teacher, sorry, I think I might have missed it. He also taught us this, like, use one labeling system. Don't use a bunch. Oh, where is it? Sorry, guys. Oh, there it is. Okay. Oh, no, it isn't. Sorry, guys. So anyway, so the labeling system, use one label. You may have, when I do testing, I usually have 5, 6, 7 different standardized tests. They may have 3 or 4 different label systems. If I'm using different labels to describe the same scores, it becomes very confusing to the person who's following along. I'm sorry, I can't find that slide. These slides will be available at some point and uploaded to the website, that IDA-NNEA, so you will be able to see them and look at the comparison chart. But whatever you choose, stick with it.
So we have a quick question about the integrity of scaled scores. They're saying that if scaled scores are less specific, do they have less integrity, even when they're converted to standard scores?
No, I don't think so. They're intended to be converted into composite scores. So the composite score is going to be the score that has the most integrity, because it's combining a bunch of different skills. And so that's going to be the most accurate score. But those sub-scores, those scaled scores, are also very informative as well. We're looking for patterns of difference. What are they, the same or different? When let me go tell you something else. Sorry, guys. I wish. Okay. So, I forgot what I was going to say. It was something about scaled scores and the standard scores.
Mhm.
Anybody have questions? I can't remember what I was going to tell you.
Okay.
As I
Someone just had, it's more of a general comment. They said it's, very challenging for students to decode, but it comes along. But encoding consistently with rule application, which we know is all critical for them to write, is very sort of across the board challenging for K to 5. And maybe you could just respond to that. There was no question in there, but it was just
yeah.
the encoding piece is more challenging.
Yes, the encoding always follows along, for sure. The encoding requires, when a child has systematic direct instruction, I think encoding comes along much better, and we see that. But if we don't have systematic instruction, then they may not get all the rules they need. They need to know, it needs to be systematic. They need to learn the 6 syllable types. They need to learn division patterns. They need to learn the rules for adding suffixes. And then they need to learn those grapheme choice for all those darn vowel teams. And the nemesis of everyone. So, yeah.
All right, I think that's pretty. Oh, there was a question just there was a question, and it was actually answered by. Oh, hang on a second. There's another question coming in. There was a question about who can actually administer these assessments. And then what we did put in is the link to, like, the New Hampshire Department of Education, basically, what are your qualifications to actually administer certain assessments? Because you're a safe, there are certain assessments that you are able to administer, but that like a case manager might not be able to administer.
So, so the tests are broken out into levels A, B, and C. Anyone can do an A. B's can be done by case managers, and usually people who have had advanced in graduate instruction in statistics, and educational assessment, doing assessments, and then they can do those B level tests. B level tests include achievement tests, the C-top, the tower, the board, those are all B levels. Your school may want the specialist to do some of those B levels, like the reading specialist maybe to do the board and those other diagnostic tests, but maybe not. The case manager, if they have a graduate degree and have had statistics and assessment, they should be able to do that. The level C are school psychologists and safes. Those include the intelligence tests.
Great, thank you. Then one of our other questions is, any suggestions on getting a good decoder, even with nonsense words, over the fluency hump?
Yes. Linda Farrell, sound by sound readers, watch the video. It's amazing. And it's with Michael. Chris, do you know his name? Michael.
Right, I know.
Michael. So yeah, sound by sound readers, amazing. I refer people to this all the time, even this week, getting the kids over that decoding hump. It's amazing. Check it out. Linda Farrell, Readsters is the company they work for.
Right. I will post that right now. Hang on.
Mm-hmm.
The videos are fabulous.
Yes, they're amazing.
They are very helpful. Michael Hunter, that's his name.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah, let me put that in there. That's just the link to Readsters, but then you can get to all the different YouTube videos that they're very, very useful. Great. All right. Could the weight of a subtest score lead to a misleading composite score that allows for our students to slip through the cracks?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So when you combine those together and get that composite score, something might look average, but you may have a vast difference. I know what I was going to tell you. Scaled scores have a standard deviation of 3. Standard scores have a standard deviation of 5. So a difference of 3 or more in scaled scores. So if I have a 10 and I get a 13, it becomes significant. 14 and above, a difference of 4 or more, that's really significant. For standard scores, a difference of 15 or more, remember working in 5 points, a standard deviation of 3 or more, 15 points becomes significant. It's like an alert, like red flag alert. Oh, we might need to pay attention to this.
Right. All right. Another question's coming in about your thoughts on spelling tests on Fridays. I note it causes such stress on students. I do apply words that are similar to words on the spelling pattern list as an assessment on Friday to match the mainstream classes on Fridays. But what are your thoughts?
So my thoughts are that the spelling should be driven by what decoding you're working on. When I used to be a case manager, I was for 10 years. I really liked it. I used to give spelling tests that they had practiced, and it would be those patterns. But then the spelling test would have half of the words would have been what they practiced, and one half would have been things they had never seen before. So they're applying that pattern. Super, super important that they do that. But many of the students, it's like, oh, I didn't even notice. It's like, oh, geez. They're different words. So that's what I recommend. I think a lot of times the spelling that is used sometimes by different programs doesn't necessarily make sense. Sometimes they do it thematic, like it's Halloween, so we throw in all our Halloween words, and it can get crazy.
Right. So the question was maybe apply words within the pattern. Is that what you're recommending?
Yeah. And then, of course, have their personal fry words. So I like to do an inventory, and I go to 15. The first 15 words they can't spell, those become their personal words. They get, depending on the student and the age, between 3 and 5 words to read and spell. And I'm most interested in them being able to spell the words. And so we're practicing the words 3 times in a row using a process. A lot of it is related to the work that Linda Farrell does. And then on the 4th time, they need to be able to spell that word independently. If they do, then the word gets retired, and we go on to adding a new word to their group of 3 that they're working on each week. So definitely get those fry words in. They need to be able to spell that first 100.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
You're
Wait,
so welcome.
here, look
You're
at this.
so
Here's another one. I apologize. Let's see. They want to know, do you teach heart words?
yes, yes. I use the heart word process. Yes.
All right. And then we're wondering fry versus dolch.
I use fry. Fry words are common words. They're not necessarily some are phonetic and some are not. But I use the fry because they're the most common.
All right. And there's a question that says, in the school environment, it seems there needs to be a cognitive deficit to get the SLD, specific learning disability. Is the CTOP okay to use as a cognitive deficit, excuse me. I am talking about a student who has a processing speed deficit, I believe, but doesn't show that doesn't show up in the WISC.
Right. And we saw that, didn't we? If you do not drill down, you are not going to see that rapid what was it? Working memory, as well as rapid naming. So rapid symbolic naming and the auditory working memory, especially holding those nonsense word chunks. You will see those if you do the CTOP, you will not see those in the WISC. So you would miss that. Yes, that's an underlying psychological process that is causing the child not to be able to decode and encode.
Great. Well, again, thank you so much. We
You're
really,
so welcome.
it's been great. Jesse, do you want to take it away?
Sure. I just wanted to say thanks everybody for coming. I think that Andrea has posted throughout about our upcoming conference, but I'll just say again that it's coming up. Andrea, I'm not on my slides. Repeat the date for, oh, here we go. So yeah, March 21st, early bird special through March 1st. Amazing speakers listed on this slide. So, Andrea, anything else to add? When will the next read for parents be?
We are currently working on scheduling our next read for parents and read for professionals. So as soon as we have those dates locked down, we'll be sure to send them out via constant contact. And if you're not on our mailing list, please drop your email in the survey at the end of this session. We'll be sure to add you to it.
Okay, great. And Facebook, constant contact. All of our membership will get that. So yes, thanks everybody for coming, and look on the website for the slides and other information as mentioned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
great evening.
Thank you.
Stay warm.
You
Thank you so
too.
much, Brenda.
You're so welcome. That was fun. Phew.